A Netflix documentary made me realize my entire life was a lie. When my dad saw himself on screen at a murder scene, he said, "Pack your things, Lee. We have 10 minutes before they realize we're blown." That's when I noticed the pistol in his hand. I was halfway through a new true crime documentary when I saw my father on screen walking through the background of crime scene footage from 20 years ago. "Dad, you need to see this right now," I called out, pausing the screen on his face. He walked into the living room, and the second he saw himself on TV, his face went white. "What are you talking about?" My heart was slamming against my ribs because my boring suburban father was on TV at a murder scene from 20 years ago. He was already yanking photos off the walls and throwing them into the fireplace. My mother came out of her office looking annoyed until she saw his face. "They aired the footage," was all he said, and she immediately ran upstairs. I heard drawers slamming while I stood frozen, watching my dad pour lighter fluid on our family photos. "Stop standing there and get your emergency bag from under your bed," he said. My legs felt like water as I ran upstairs and found a bag under my bed that I'd never known was there before, already packed with clothes and cash and a passport with my picture, but a different name, Madison Charleston. There were also car keys to a vehicle I didn't recognize and a burner phone still in its packaging. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely zip it back up. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's happening," I said, my voice cracking. My dad looked at his watch and then at my mom, who was suddenly in the doorway with 3 duffel bags. "Your real name is Madison Charleston, and we've been in witness protection since you were 5 years old," he said while the photos curled into black ash. The words didn't make sense, but the weapon in his hand was real, and the terror in my mother's eyes was real, and my entire life was apparently fake. "This can't be real," I said, backing against the wall. "We live in Ohio, and you work at State Farm, and Mom teaches piano lessons." My dad actually laughed, but it sounded bitter and wrong. "I haven't worked a day at State Farm, and your mother hasn't touched a piano since we got here. Those are just the stories we tell people." My mom was stuffing ammunition boxes into one of the duffel bags, like this was completely normal. "The piano students who come here are federal agents checking in on us," she said without looking up. My mother's phone rang and she answered in a harsh, guttural language, then switched to English. "Handlers compromised. We're on our own. They killed Tyson an hour ago." My dad swore and pulled a revolver from inside the cereal box. Everything felt like a movie happening to someone else as I watched my suburban dad check the ammunition, like he'd done it 1,000 times. "How long until they get here?" he asked my mom. 20 minutes if we're lucky, 5 if we're not," she replied, and then looked at me. "Can you shoot?" I shook my head and she pressed a knife into my hand instead. "Then you carry this and stay between us no matter what happens." Here's what I realized in that moment of complete chaos. I wasn't actually helpless. While my parents had been living as insurance agents and piano teachers, I'd been building real skills they didn't even know about. I was a senior at Ohio State studying criminal justice with a 3.9 GPA, and I'd spent 3 years working part-time for defense attorney Marcus Webb's law firm doing case research and evidence analysis. More importantly, I'd been documenting everything weird about our family for years without realizing it. My criminology professor, Dr. Lisa Hoffman, had assigned us to keep detailed observation journals about suspicious behavior patterns. I'd been recording every inconsistency about my parents' stories, every time their explanations didn't add up, every federal agent who came to our house pretending to be a piano student. "Someone leaked that footage on purpose because they've been looking for us," my dad explained while my mom backed the car into the garage. "I testified against the Serbian mob about those murders. They think I died that day with the rest of the Anelli family, but I survived and helped put them in prison. Now they know I'm alive." The documentary was still paused on his face, and I wanted to throw up. "But why did you testify?" I asked, and his jaw tightened. "Because I helped them launder money for 5 years, and I knew where all the bodies were buried. The law gave me a choice, and I chose to keep you safe." My phone started buzzing with texts from my best friend, but my dad grabbed it and snapped it in half, then threw it in the fire. I watched my best friend's messages disappear into flames along with every photo of my fake childhood. Lee Lane was already dead, and I was Madison Charleston now, someone I didn't even know how to be. The doorbell rang and my parents both raised their weapons. "I know you're in there, Wade," a man called out with an accent that made my mom grab my arm hard enough to bruise. "Netflix is amazing, isn't it? My nephew called me 20 minutes ago about the documentary. He recognized you immediately, and then we checked your daughter's Instagram. So many helpful photos with location tags." My stomach dropped because I had posted a picture from our front porch just yesterday. But then my criminal justice training kicked in. These people had found us through social media, which meant they were using technology I understood. They were organized but not necessarily sophisticated, and they'd made the mistake of announcing their presence instead of maintaining surveillance. My mom was pulling out a Glock from her purse like it belonged there. The man outside laughed and said something in Serbian to someone else. "Come out, and we'll make this quick, or we can burn the house down with you inside like we should have done 20 years ago." "How many?" my dad whispered to my mom. She peeked through the blinds and held up 4 fingers, then pointed up and held up 2 more. 6 people had come to kill us, but I was already thinking strategically. 6 attackers meant they'd brought overwhelming force, which suggested they expected resistance, but weren't necessarily professional killers. Professional hitmen work in pairs or solo. This was a revenge squad, which meant they were emotional and potentially sloppy. "When I open the garage door, you drive straight through whatever's in front of us," my dad told me, pushing me into the driver's seat. Even though I'd only had my license for 3 months, and that's when I saw the black SUVs blocking both ends of our street. My dad hit the garage door opener, and I slammed my foot down on the gas pedal before the door was even halfway up. The car shot forward and smashed through the bottom half of the door. I felt wood and metal scraping across the roof and hood as we burst into the driveway. The black SUVs were right there, one blocking the left side of the street and one blocking the right. I could see men in dark clothes turning toward us with guns in their hands. My dad was yelling at me to turn right, and my mom twisted in her seat and fired 2 shots out her window toward the SUV on the left. The sound inside the car was so loud it hurt my ears, and I screamed but kept my foot on the gas. I cranked the steering wheel as hard as I could to the right, and the car jumped over the curb into our neighbor's front yard. What happened next changed everything about how I understood my parents. My mom wasn't just firing randomly, she was systematically targeting the attacker's vehicle tires with precision that spoke to professional training. My dad wasn't panicking. He was coordinating our escape route through neighborhoods he'd obviously memorized for exactly this scenario. These weren't insurance agents and piano teachers who'd been thrown into crisis. These were professionals who'd been maintaining cover identities while staying ready for exactly this moment. We crashed through a white picket fence and bounced down a steep slope into the drainage area. The car bottomed out hard and something metal scraped underneath, making a horrible grinding sound. My dad pointed to a concrete tunnel opening and I drove toward it, the car sliding sideways in the mud. We made it maybe 20 feet into the tunnel before the car got stuck on something and the wheels just spun uselessly. My dad yelled for us to get out and run, and I grabbed my emergency bag and threw open the door. The tunnel was dark and smelled like sewage and old water, and I could hear shouting in Serbian coming from behind us. My mom grabbed my arm and pulled me forward into the darkness, and we started running. The knife she had given me was still in my other hand, and I gripped it so hard my fingers hurt. As we splashed through ankle-deep water in complete darkness, my criminology training was processing everything. We were in Toledo's storm drain system, which I knew from urban planning classes connected to the Maumee River about 2 miles north. The acoustics would confuse our pursuers about direction and distance, and there were multiple exit points if we could navigate in the dark. My dad suddenly pulled us sideways into a concrete alcove I hadn't even seen. We pressed ourselves against the cold, wet wall. I was trying so hard to control my breathing, but my chest was heaving, and I thought for sure they would hear us. The footsteps got closer, and I heard men talking in that harsh language, and then a flashlight beam swept past our hiding spot. I held my breath and squeezed my eyes shut like that would somehow make me invisible. The footsteps passed right by us so close I could smell cigarette smoke on someone's clothes. The voices moved away down the tunnel, and I started to breathe again. But then they came back. The searchers walked past our alcove a second time, and I heard one of them say something that made the others laugh. The water sounds and the echoes seemed to confuse them about exactly where we were hiding. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes, the voices faded away completely. My dad waited another minute, then signaled us to move deeper into the drainage system, away from where the searchers had gone. We walked for what felt like forever through the dark tunnels, taking turns whenever my dad indicated. Finally, we reached a different exit that came out in someone's backyard 6 blocks from our house. We climbed out, covered in mud and dirty water, and I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. My mom pulled out the burner phone and made a call, speaking in English this time. She said we needed immediate pickup and our handler was dead, then gave an address I didn't recognize. When she hung up, she told my dad she was going alone to get the backup car from a storage unit, and she'd meet us at the gas station on Miller Road in 20 minutes. My dad and I hid behind a dumpster at a closed gas station, crouching in the shadows while he kept checking his watch. This was the first moment we'd had to actually breathe since I paused that documentary. I looked at my dad and realized he wasn't the boring insurance agent anymore. He was someone who knew how to run and hide and shoot. That person had always been there under the surface. His hands were steady on his gun, and his eyes kept scanning the street like he'd done this 1,000 times before. That's when I made a decision that would define everything that came next. Instead of staying passive and letting my parents handle this crisis, I was going to use every skill I developed in 3 years of criminal justice study to help us survive. "Dad," I said quietly, "I need to tell you something. I'm not just a college student. I work for defense attorney Marcus Webb researching criminal cases. I know how law enforcement coordinates manhunts, and I know how criminal organizations operate. We need to think strategically about this." My dad stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "What kind of research?" "Evidence analysis, witness protection protocols, organized crime patterns. I've spent 3 years studying exactly the kind of people who are hunting us." I pulled out my phone, not the one he'd destroyed, but a second device I carried for work that had secure communications with the law firm. More importantly, I have direct contacts with federal prosecutors through my internship. Attorney Webb has handled 12 witness protection cases, and his partner, David Brennan, specializes in organized crime prosecution. If our federal handler is dead, we need new protection, and I know exactly who to call. 20 minutes later, my mom pulled up in an old Civic I'd never seen, and we jumped in with our bags. She'd changed into different clothes and had a baseball cap pulled down low over her face. She looked nothing like the woman who taught piano lessons and made cookies for her students last week. As we drove away from our neighborhood, I took control of the situation in a way that surprised all 3 of us. "Before we go anywhere, I'm calling my supervisor at Webb and Brennan Law Firm. They have emergency contacts with the U.S. Marshals Service, and Attorney Webb has successfully relocated 43 families in the past 5 years. My dad started to object, but I continued. "The people hunting us found us through social media and public records. That means they're using standard investigative techniques, not sophisticated counterintelligence. My professors have taught me how to analyze criminal organization capabilities. And this is a revenge operation, not a professional assassination team." I dialed Webb's emergency line on my secure phone. Marcus Webb answered on the second ring, and his voice was immediately alert when I identified myself. "Madison, what's your emergency status?" "My family is under active threat from organized crime figures. Our federal handler has been killed, and we need immediate witness protection coordination. I'm sending you our location data now." "Understood." I'm activating our emergency protocols. Do not use any credit cards or regular phones. I'm coordinating with U.S. Marshal Rebecca Torres right now, and she'll contact you within 15 minutes with secure pickup instructions. By taking control of our situation through my professional contacts, I'd given us something my parents' stolen car and burner phones couldn't provide. Legitimate federal protection, backed by an established law firm with documented success in organized crime cases. The burner phone rang exactly 14 minutes later. U.S. Marshal Rebecca Torres gave my mom an address for a truck stop outside Toledo. She said we needed to meet her there in 30 minutes, and she'd coordinate our transfer to a secure federal facility. The individual who gave you this number has exceptional credentials with our service, Marshal Torres said. Attorney Webb's cases have a 97% success rate for client protection. You'll be in federal custody within the hour. As we drove to the meeting point, I explained to my parents how my criminal justice education had prepared me for exactly this scenario. Professor Hoffman teaches a course on organized crime investigations. The Serbian mob operates through family networks, not professional cells. They're emotional, which makes them predictable. They also have limited resources compared to other criminal organizations. The fact that they found us through Netflix and Instagram means they're using open-source intelligence, not sophisticated surveillance. That's actually good news, because federal law enforcement has massive advantages over amateur investigators. We reached the truck stop exactly 30 minutes after the call. A plain gray sedan was parked near the entrance, with someone sitting in the driver's seat. My dad told us to stay in the car while he approached alone, but I overruled him. I'm the one with the professional relationship here. Marshal Torres is expecting to meet Webb and Brennan's research associate, which is me. We go together. A woman in her 40s got out wearing a blazer and khaki pants. She looked like a teacher or a businesswoman, nothing like what I expected a U.S. Marshal to look like. She asked my dad something, and he started reciting details that sounded like dates and places and names. She nodded and then looked at me. You must be Madison Charleston, Webb and Brennan associate. Attorney Webb speaks very highly of your analytical capabilities. Hearing my real name from a federal marshal who knew my professional background made me feel dizzy, but also validated. This wasn't just family chaos anymore. This was a legitimate law enforcement operation coordinated through established legal channels. Marshal Torres told us our handler, Tyson, was found shot in his apartment 3 hours ago. 2 bullets to the head, execution style. She said it looked professional and the crime scene was clean, which meant the Serbian organization had more sophisticated capabilities than I'd initially assessed. Attorney Webb has briefed me on your family's situation, she continued. Someone inside the documentary production company leaked information about the footage before it aired. The Serbian mob had time to prepare and coordinate the attack on your house. We're investigating the leak, but right now, my priority is keeping you alive. She needed us to follow her to a temporary safe house while they figured out next steps. My dad asked how long we'd have to stay there, and she said she didn't know yet. Everything depended on what the investigation turned up and whether they caught the people hunting us. But I had a different plan. Instead of just accepting passive protection, I was going to use my research skills to help solve this case. Marshal Torres, I have access to the university's criminal justice database and 3 years of training in organized crime analysis. I can help identify the suspects' operational patterns and predict their next moves. She looked at me with something like respect. Attorney Webb mentioned you have exceptional analytical skills. What's your assessment of the threat level? Medium to high capability, but limited operational security. They exposed themselves through social media contact, used excessive force instead of surgical precision, and they're operating in emotional revenge mode rather than professional elimination mode. That makes them dangerous, but predictable. Marshal Torres nodded. That matches our initial assessment. The question is whether they have additional resources we haven't identified yet. Over the next several hours, I worked with federal investigators to analyze the Serbian organization's operational capabilities. Using the criminal justice database, I identified 14 individuals connected to the original prosecution 20 years ago who were now out of prison and had the means to coordinate revenge operations. More importantly, I discovered that the Netflix production company had used 3 different editing houses to process the documentary footage. This meant at least a dozen people had access to the raw files at various points. I cross-referenced those employees with Serbian surnames and found 2 individuals with family connections to the original prosecution. By morning, federal agents had arrested 4 suspects based on my research, including the Netflix employee who'd leaked the footage. The remaining Serbian organization members were either in custody or had fled the country, and the immediate threat to my family was effectively neutralized. Marshal Torres called us into a final briefing session. Madison's analytical work has been instrumental in resolving this case. The suspects will face federal charges for conspiracy, murder, and attempted murder. Your family's security threat has been permanently eliminated. My dad looked at me with something I'd never seen before: professional respect. I had no idea you were capable of this level of strategic thinking. 20 years of witness protection kept us alive, I replied. But 3 years of criminal justice education just ended the threat permanently. The difference is that now we don't have to hide anymore. Marshal Torres offered us new identities and permanent relocation, but for the first time in 20 years, we didn't need them. The Serbian organization was dismantled. The immediate threat was neutralized, and we could return to normal life, whatever that might look like for a family that had been living under fake names for 2 decades. 6 months later, I graduated from Ohio State with highest honors in criminal justice. Professor Hoffman recommended me for a competitive internship with the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force, where my case analysis skills had become legendary among federal investigators. Marcus Webb offered me a full-time position at his law firm with a starting salary of $68,000 plus benefits, specializing in witness protection coordination and organized crime defense. My parents came to my graduation ceremony using their real names for the first time in 20 years. The extraordinary thing was discovering that my parents' criminal backgrounds and my law enforcement education actually complemented each other perfectly. My dad's inside knowledge of money laundering operations combined with my legal research capabilities made us an exceptional team for helping other witness protection families navigate similar crises. We started a consulting business helping families in witness protection maintain their security while building legitimate lives. My mom's private security background, my dad's organized crime expertise, and my legal training created a unique service that federal agencies now recommend to high-risk families. The Netflix documentary that nearly got us killed became the foundation of our new business. We work with production companies to identify and protect witness identities in archived footage, preventing other families from experiencing what we went through. Today, I'm Madison Charleston, federal crime analyst and witness protection consultant. Lee Lane was the fake identity that kept me alive until I was old enough to protect myself. But Madison Charleston is someone who uses professional expertise to protect families from the kind of people who once hunted us. The Serbian mob thought they were hunting an insurance agent and his family. Instead, they encountered a woman with federal law enforcement training, professional legal contacts, and analytical skills they never saw coming. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being more competent than the people trying to destroy you.